Welcome to the RHY Training Addendum. Prior to taking this course, you should have viewed the HMIS Introductory Series and the Case Management Series. This RHY training will only cover information that is unique to RHY, not the entire workflow in detail. If you have any questions about the basic workflows, you'll have to refer to the Introductory and the Case Management Series. Let's begin. So before continuing with the RHY project entry, we're gonna want to make sure that we're in the proper Enter Data As and Backdate mode. So I'll jump to Enter Data As. I'll jump to my RHY program, and I'm going to backdate the first July 1st of last year, just so we have some room to do a couple of interim updates throughout this training session. And once I set my backdate, you'll see my bar turn yellow. All right, perfect. So I'm going to go and jump to my client, which I have saved under favorites. This is a fake client, of course, for RHY training. And so we're not going to go through every detail in searching for a client and this basic information here, but if you have any questions on those topics, you can always refer to the introductory series for further information. As a good policy, it's always good to work from left to right just to make sure you've done all the appropriate options. So I'll move to households. In our scenario, we're not going to complete a household, but if you did, you would complete it at this point. And I'll move to ROI next. So balance of state users are required to enter their releases of information electronically into HMIS. Maricopa users are not required to do this. In most cases, most Maricopa users will not even see this tab. But for balance of state users, we'll simply add a release of information. In this case, I'll say the release was granted, and we'll say it's granted for a year. And I'll put my information as the witness. Perfect. So this is very important for balance of state users. If this release of information is not a file, this data will not be shared with anyone else. And even if the client does not give permission, that is fine, but we still want to make sure that we enter and record it in HMIS. So now we'll jump to the Entry Exit tab, and we'll do the bulk of our data entry. So I'm just going to minimize the tabs on the left here to give us more space to work with. So we're going to go ahead and click Add Entry Exit. And as usual, we're going to make sure the provider and our project start date are correct. If they're not, we'd back out and change our EDA in our backdate mode. And for type, for a RHY program, we're going to select RHY. So we'll click Save and Continue. Perfect. And so the elements for universal data elements and the program data elements have already been pre-filled out for the purposes of this training. Those elements have been covered in the introductory series. So if you want further detail on any of those questions, you'll want to refer to the introductory series. The only note here is that for date of birth for RHY programs, we definitely want to make sure that we get a full date of birth, since it's it relates to eligibility for programs, so it's especially important to get a full date of birth if possible. Also, when doing assessments, we always want to move left to right. So if your client is entering your program for the first time and they have prior information, you will go and reconfirm that everything is correct, and you'll update any fields, especially surrounding the chronic homeless questions. But we'll just go and move on. Move on to the program data elements. Those have been filled out as well. And we'll move on to the RHY program elements, which is where the bulk of data entry will occur. So there are quite a few RHY program questions. And as you can see at the top, this is actually split into 4 different, I'm just going to center this just a little bit. There are 4 different sections. So we want to make sure that we read each section in its header to know what we're doing. So we're going to read the first section header, and it says complete the questions below only at initial entry in the program. So we'll go through these questions and see what each one is about. So we'll start with referral source. And we're just going to simply select from the drop down where the client was referred to, from who referred the client to us, and it could be themselves. So we'll just select that. Next we have the date of BCP status determination. So this is where you document the date of the BCP status determination. This allows the BCP emergency shelter to record a youth that is not eligible under the FISB RHY program. When reporting does happen to RHY, RHY will remove youth who are not BCP status determined. Okay. And then we have a couple of dependent questions for this one here. So if yes, let's take a quick look here. So if no, you would simply select the reason that they're not eligible. I'm going to select that this client is. And if for yes, and if they're eligible, you're going to simply indicate whether or not they are a runaway youth. The next question we have on this entry is the sexual orientation. Now, this question is voluntary, and the youth must be informed that this is a voluntary question. Refusal to answer this question cannot result in denial of services. It is expected that this field may be updated as some trust is built or some rapport is built with the client. Next, we have formally award of a child welfare foster care agency, and this is simply going to be a yes or a no. You're going to indicate the time frame in the next two drop downs there. And then the same question, formally award of the juvenile justice system. It's going to be a simple yes, no. And you're going to indicate for how long, if applicable, for those questions there. Okay, perfect. So we're going to go ahead and move further down to the family critical issues section. And so this field is meant to identify family issues which may have contributed to the client's homelessness or may be a factor in family reunification. So a lot of these questions are surrounded around the family situation, not necessarily the situation of the youth. So unemployment for a family member, were there issues with an adult family member's ability to find or secure steady employment? Mental health issues, this relates to the family members or the members of the family having mental health issues. Same thing with physical disabilities, and so forth for all 6 questions. Okay, perfect. So it looks like that's the completion of the first section there. Now, section 2 does go ahead and indicate that we want to complete the question below every time there is an update. So we will complete this since we are creating the record for the first time. And this is really applicable for females. You do not have to answer this question for males. So the question is pregnant, and we're just going to update that for now and say no. For section 3, you want to complete the following questions at entry and exit only, not for interim updates. So you'll touch these questions twice throughout the entire program, when they first enter and when they first exit. Since we're doing the entry right now, we're definitely going to go ahead and answer these questions. So last grade completed, you'll simply select from the drop down the most appropriate answer. Let's see here. You're also going to select school status. Once again, you're just going to select from the drop down. Now, this indicates the status of the youth's attendance, regular attendance, partials, and so forth. Now, if the client isn't in school currently, if there's a summer break or something of that sort, you're going to select whatever their attendance was like just prior to break beginning. We'll also answer the employed question. That's going to be a yes or a no. And then you're going to answer the dependent question. If yes, you'll answer that question. If no, you'll answer that question. Perfect. We're also going to look at the 3 questions about the health status of the client. So general health status, dental health status, and mental health status. You're just going to take an assessment from excellent to poor. Okay, perfect. And section 4 looks like complete the questions below only when the client is exiting from the program. So we know we're going to leave this alone because we're just doing the entry. So now that we've completed the initial entry into the program for the RHY elements, we're going to scroll. So we'll scroll all the way back up. And the final assessment would be a custom agency assessment. This would be questions specific to your program if your program did have additional questions they wanted to touch on. In our case, we won't cover any agency-specific questions, list the questions required by the RHY program specifically. So we'll go ahead and exit, and we'll see our entry into the project here. Now, before we do an update, we'll want to go and note that there are a requirement for service transactions to be required. For service transactions to be required for RHY clients. So we'll go to the Service Transactions tab just to see what that looks like. And we'll go ahead and add a service here. And if you have any questions about adding services, you'll want to refer to the case management series for the basic workflow. At this point, for the RHY training, we're just going to cover the basic RHY elements and the additional jobs that you have to complete to record a RHY service. So we want to make sure that everything is correct for the service provider as well as the dates. And we'll start by selecting a service type. So let's go save and continue. And these fields here, you'll go ahead and complete based on your agency, so you'll definitely want to refer to your agency. Now, the field that's required for RHY programs is the type of RHY service dropdown. This is the one that's especially important for reporting purposes, so you'll want to go ahead and pull this up and select the most appropriate option from the dropdown here. So let's take a quick look. All right. And then, once again, you'll complete the other fields based on your agency preferences since they're not required by the RHY program. But ultimately, at the need information at the bottom is you'll complete the closed and the fully met before saving and exiting from the service transaction. But in short, the only difference between the normal case management training and RHY programs is that RHY programs have the one additional drop-down, which you'll definitely want to complete every time recording when you're recording a service transaction. So we'll save and exit from there. Right, and we'll jump back down to the client information tab. Now we're going to change our backdate mode to a couple months later, and just saying, we're going to say in our scenario that we're updating the client's record or there's been some new information. We'll set our backdate. And so to do an interim update, it's simply going to go ahead and click the interim icon. We'll click add interim review. And we're just going to do an update here. Right, perfect. So once again, it's always good to go ahead and move from left to right and double check your answers. Now, the universal date elements really shouldn't change, but if there was an error, for example, there was an incorrect birth date or you're making a correction, that can be done. We also have the program data elements, and so this is where you'd update income, non-cash benefits, health insurance, disabilities. We're not going to cover updating those particular items in this training since that is covered in the HMI's introductory series. What we'll really focus on here is updating the RHY program elements. Now, once again, it's a pretty lengthy assessment, so we want to make sure that we're looking at each section of the 4 sections and seeing which sections we actually have to update during an interim assessment. So section 1, complete the questions below only at initial entry into the program. Well, this is an update, so I'm just going to skip this section here entirely. Section 2, complete the question below every time there's an update. So we'll just go ahead and reconfirm this question here. In my scenario, the client is still not pregnant, so we won't make any changes, but we did go ahead and just verify that this is correct. If this did in fact turn out that the client was pregnant, you would flip this to yes at this time. Section 3, complete the following questions at entry and exit only, not for interim updates, so we're going to leave this one alone. And section 4, complete the questions below only when a client is exiting from the program. In this case, we're going to leave this one alone as well, since we're not exiting the client at this point. So really for updates for RHY programs, it's really going to come down mostly to the program data elements regarding income, non-cash benefits, and health insurance. Finally, you could complete the custom agency assessment, but that would be up to your agency and it's not covered in this training. But once you're complete with the update, you would simply just go down and click save and exit. Okay, perfect. And so that's pretty straightforward for this part here. So once again, you can continue to record service transactions for the client, the only difference being the addition of the RHY dropdown. So the only real difference, we'll see a lot more questions, is when we're exiting the client from a RHY program. So we're going to change our backdate mode. Let's put it a couple more months out. And we're going to say that we're actually exiting our client from the program at this point. So to exit a client, we'll simply go ahead and click the pencil icon next to the exit date. Okay, perfect. So we'll make sure our exit date is correct, which is the same date as our backdate mode. And first we'll complete our reason for leaving. So I completed the program. And for destination, you'll select the most appropriate destination. Now for RHY programs, family reunification should be entered as staying or living with family, permanent tenure. So that would be this one right here. If it is family reunification, this is the option you would select. We'll click save and continue. And so a new assessment, the Universal Exit Assessment, does populate here. And so this is very similar to the program data elements. And here you'll update any sort of income, non-cash benefits, health insurance and disabilities, and so forth. As stated previously, this is covered in the introductory series, so we won't change any elements here. In our scenario, we'll say that our client hasn't actually changed any of these these elements upon their exit. We'll go ahead and we'll definitely want to touch on the RHY program elements again though, because for the past couple of viewings it looks like there's a lot of exit questions for the RHY program. So we'll go ahead and look at our sections again. Section 1, complete only initial entry. So we're doing an exit, so we won't complete that here. Section 2, complete this at every point, entry, updates, and exit. So we'll just go and reconfirm whether or not this question is still accurate. In our scenario, we'll say that this answer is still accurate. Section 3 is complete the following questions at entry and exit only. So while we didn't complete these at the interim updates, we are going to go ahead and update this for the exit, just in case something is different in the client status. So we'll go ahead and indicate, if they're the same, leave it alone, but let's say the client did become employed. We're going to go ahead and flip that to a yes. And if yes, type of employment, we're going to say part-time, and we'll go and clear this answer out here. And so that's how we would update at the exit. It's really to compare the client's situation from the start of the program to the exit of the program. And we're just going to make sure that these are the same. If they're not, we would just go ahead and update the question as necessary. So section 4 is complete the questions below only when the client is exiting from the program. So we have a lot of new questions right here, and we're definitely going to want to look at each one of these. So these questions, so for example, ever receive something in exchange for sex, for example, money, food, drugs, or shelter. These questions used to be on the entry assessment for a RHY participant. They've actually changed that to build a rapport with clients, so they're more likely to answer the question honestly. And then depending on your answer, there's a few dependent questions, and if the answer is yes to this, you would indicate if it was in a specific time frame, how many times, and if there was ever any coercion involved regarding that. There's also a question, similar sets of questions regarding work. So ever afraid to quit or leave work due to threats of violence to yourself, family, or friends? There's also ever promised to work where work or payment was different than you expected. So click yes or no here, but if either one of these questions is yes, you are going to answer these dependent questions, getting more information about the coercion or the time frame as well. If these previous two answers were no, you would leave these blank. Complete project completion status, you're simply going to indicate whether or not the project was completed. Now, if you do select that the youth was expelled or discharged from the project, you're just simply going to answer the dependent question, why they were expelled. We also have the question counseling received by a client, and these are new data elements that RHY just created in the past year. So we'll indicate yes or no. And if the answer is yes, you're going to indicate the type of counseling received. Right. And they're going to indicate how many sessions of counseling they actually received at the exit, by the exit of the program. And there's a few more questions about the counseling. So the total number of sessions planned in use, treatment, or service plan. And if there's a plan in place to start or continue counseling after exit. And just answer yes or no whether there is a plan in place to start or continue counseling after exit. The next two questions are regarding the exit destination. The exit destination safe, as determined by client, is the client's opinion of where they're heading off to is a safe location. The second one is the exit destination safe, as determined by the project or caseworker, is whether or not they believe that the location is safe. Now, this should be assessed by the staff member most engaged with the client. So even if there's a particular case manager responsible for entering this data, you want to get this assessment from the staff member who's most engaged and most familiar with the client. And the final three questions are, does the client have permanent positive connections with adults outside of the project, with peers outside of the project, and have positive community connections outside of the project? These are actually determined by the caseworker, not by the client, so it'll be up to the caseworker's discretion to determine whether or not they believe the client has positive adult, peer, and community connections. And once you're complete with that, you would go ahead and of course check to see if you had a custom agency assessment. Since we don't in this particular case, we'll go ahead and click Save and Exit. And we now have a start date and exit date. And that is how you do the entry and exit for the RHY programs. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.